March 9th, 1980. A street vendor stops a man dragging a terrified child through a market. Police arrive. The man is calm, too calm. And when he starts talking, he leads them to 53 bodies buried in the hills. But here's what breaks the system. He claimed 300 victims. They could only prove 3. He served 14 years. And then he walked out. This is the story of the children the system lost and the man who vanished into the same cracks that enabled him. In the late 1970s, across Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, children lived between survival and disappearance. Not because their families didn't care, but because poverty, violence, and collapsing institutions pushed them into the open, unprotected. Picture Ambato, Ecuador, 1979, a crowded marketplace. Children moving through it like threads, selling flowers, shining shoes, carrying baskets twice their weight. These weren't street children. They were children of the street. Children with dreams, families, morning routines, favorite songs. Children who deserved safety. Before we go further, remember that image. March 9th, 1980. One person paying attention. That moment, it's the only reason we know any of this. Keep that in mind as we go back to where this started. There was the market girl, 8 to 12 years old, selling flowers in the plaza. There was the displaced child, forced into the city by Colombia's violence. And the indigenous girl, drifting through Peruvian markets, speaking Quechua at home, and hesitant Spanish in the streets. We cannot name them all. That is the tragedy this story must confront. And then absences began to appear like cracks. A mother in Tolima waiting hours longer than she should. A grandmother in Ayacucho knocking on doors. Vendors in Ambato realizing fewer children showed up to work. These weren't isolated heartbreaks. They were warnings, ignored because the systems meant to protect them had already collapsed. Stay with me, because what happens next is where the system truly breaks down. The danger was moving across borders, but information wasn't. Colombia didn't share missing child reports with Ecuador. Ecuador didn't share them with Peru. No database, no alerts, no urgency for children living on the margins. And years earlier, in 1969, a man named Pedro Alonso López was arrested for stealing a car. Inside La Modelo prison, he was assaulted. He retaliated, killing 3 inmates. He served additional time and then walked out. No monitoring, no evaluation, no oversight. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from and what time is it right now? Your comments help this story reach more people who care about the truth. And if you want more deep, human-centered true crime stories like this, hit subscribe. It helps the channel grow, and it ensures forgotten victims are never erased again. There were children who escaped him and tried to report it. Witnesses raised alarms, but every warning fell through broken cracks. Then, on March 9th, 1980, in Ambato, everything shifted. Picture it, a crowded marketplace, dozens of people moving through stalls, and one man, one street vendor, who stopped walking. He saw a grown man, calm and composed, with an iron grip on a child's wrist. The girl wasn't screaming, she was frozen. That's what made him act. One ordinary morning. One man paying attention. One child who survived. When police detained Pedro López, they did not yet understand who they had. He was quiet, calm, and then he began to speak.
What he told them led investigators into the hills of Ambato, to shallow graves, to the remains of 53 children. Let me show you why the numbers don't add up and why they couldn't add up, even if investigators wanted them to.
300 to 350 claimed, 110 verified through investigation, 53 bodies physically found, 3 prosecuted in Ecuador. Not because anyone doubted the others existed, but because the infrastructure to prove it didn't exist yet. No database, no DNA technology, no cross-border communication. Just paperwork that stopped at borders. Pedro López was born in Tolima, Colombia in 1948, a childhood of abandonment and abuse. But trauma does not create monsters. He made his choices. He bears responsibility. And here's the part that investigators still can't believe. On January 27, 1981, López was convicted of only 3 murders. The maximum penalty was 16 years. The trial would become a mathematics problem. How do you prosecute 300 murders when you can only prove 3? On August 31, 1994, after roughly 14 years, López walked out of prison. In Colombia, he was detained again, linked to another girl's murder, but released after being declared mentally fit. He vanished into the same cracks that once enabled him. His last confirmed sighting, September 22, 1999, Bogotá Registry Office. After that, nothing. But the story doesn't end there. In fact, it barely begins. Decades later, the markets of Ambato still echo with the footsteps of children working, surviving, hoping. The vulnerabilities remain: poverty, displacement, underfunded systems. But there are people fighting back: street workers, investigators, families. For the identified victims, your daughters are remembered with dignity. For the unnamed, you were loved. You deserved protection. This story cannot end with the fugitive. It must end with us. To honor these children, we demand equal urgency for all missing children. We support the organizations protecting vulnerable families. We push for sentencing laws that reflect the gravity of crimes against children. This is not the story of a monster. It is the story of the children we failed and the responsibility we carry now to make sure it never happens again.